Hi, this is Jürgen Rasmussen speaking. This video is for students of my psychological illusion model, and I've done 3 seminars recently. I did one in London, I did one in Denmark, and one in Belgium. And there are some very interesting questions coming up from participants on the forum. So this video is for you guys, and I thought it was about time that I made a troubleshooting video, a kind of cleanup video to answer some of the questions in detail and do my best to clear up a few misunderstandings and traps along the way. So here we go. First of all, one person or several people actually have had some questions around the whole serial killer format. And very recently, Michael posted about a client who the score on the negative emotion would come down to a 1, but wouldn't quite get to a 0. And then they started doing these various submodality changes to kind of get it back down to 0. And I thought I would address that because this can be something of a trap. When I stumbled onto this whole serial killer experiment, I essentially made a discovery myself. And that is that various schools of NLP, rational emotive behavior therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, these types of modalities are often very good in helping people discover that what they're experiencing is their own thinking or their own interpretations. But there is very often inherently an idea that you have to work on those interpretations. You have to either change the content of your thinking, or you have to change the structure of your thinking, or you have to replace it with something. You have to do something about it. And when I first spontaneously did this with my first client, it suddenly dawned on me that look, you can think the most horrible thoughts imaginable in terms of content and have zero stress. That means that no image, no sentence, no combination of words are in and of themselves inherently stressful. So nothing you think is in and of itself inherently stressful. Nothing that you think is in and of itself inherently dangerous or threatening or anything like that. So to me, using the serial killer format is designed to help people realize that they can go from a high score to a very low score or a 0 score without changing the content of their thinking at all. This is huge. This is huge. This is why one of the big things when you do the serial killer format is, let's say someone initially gives you a 7 or they give you an 8. You want to always ask the question, what do you think that means? Because the person could easily say, yeah, that means that if this really happened, I'd be devastated. This is a huge misunderstanding. You don't want to let someone get away with thinking that, because that's not what their feeling is telling them. The feeling is telling them the extent to which their thinking process is unseen, the extent to which they haven't seen a thought as a thought in the moment. So if you're able to see something completely as a thought or as a thinking process, you'll have zero stress about it. So a person can have the same content of thinking and go from a high score to a very low score. And it's really important to help the person make the discovery that your thinking didn't change. So that means that the content of your thinking does not have to change for you to have a very different experience internally. The feelings just tell you about the amount of buy-in or the amount of ignorance or at the level you were able to see those thoughts as thoughts or not. So this is huge. Now, let's say, so the whole idea that you have to change your interpretations, replace it with something, create a new representation is, in my view, deeply flawed. You don't have to. Like when people make serious discoveries based upon the serial killer format, they suddenly realize that negative thinking in of itself is not stressful. Hear that again. Negative thinking in of itself is not inherently stressful. Now, if you look at this a bit more broadly, the only thing that the client really ever experiences is their own images and words and sentences and body sensations. That's all they really experience. So people fear their own internal experiences. They've marked out particular thoughts, particular emotions, particular body sensations as somehow dangerous or threatening. But there is no inherent threat or danger in any of them. That's the truth. That's the truth of it. The illusion is that it is. You can use formats like this as pointers to help people see through that illusion that there is anything inherently dangerous or stressful about their internal experience. So one reason why I'm saying this is because let's say that a client gets to a 2 or gets to a 1, but they don't get to a 0. If you then make a big deal out of that and start doing a lot of techniques and submodalities and anchors and stuff like that to get the person to a 0, what are you implying? What frame will you very easily reinforce in the client? It has to get to a 0. We have to do something about this. So be careful about this. Now, the fact that you don't have to do anything doesn't mean that you have to do nothing. You can change an experience. I mean, I meditate from 35 to about 50 minutes a day. So there's nothing about that. But if you're trying to help the person make the discovery that their internal experience is not inherently dangerous or stressful, then attempting to do a lot of stuff in terms of techniques when someone is at a 1 to get them to a 0 will very likely be counterproductive. So what if it's at a 1? So what if it's at a 2? It doesn't really matter. So in cases like this, another big thing is that the more deeply you see this yourself, the more likely you're going to be able to help the client to see it. Because if you can be completely at peace no matter what they experience, that's a very useful and empowering thing, because it shows that you're not afraid of their experience. You're not afraid of your own internal experience. So you can model that with them. Instead of really trying to get to the 0, you make the point that it's completely okay to be at a 1 or at a 2. It's completely okay to be whatever they are. It's just about understanding the mechanism. Now, you can task the person with doing this on their own, and very often, most often, it will drop to a 0 on its own if you just give it a few days or give the person the task to practice it. But it's not because you've masked something or created an anchor or adjusted the submodalities. It's because they've had a deeper insight into the nature of their own experience. So be careful about this one. There's a few other things here I want to address as well. In terms of the whole psychological illusion model, remember this: none of you have to work the way I do. And I don't always work this way either. As I presented in the seminars, I think there are different levels at which you can work. You can use different frameworks, but you want to know which frameworks that you're using and make sure that you're very clean about it. So for example, you can work at the level of behavior. This is the world of exposure therapy and ordeals and all sorts of behavioral tasks. You can work at the level of content, changing the content of what someone's thinking. This is quite common in many schools of psychology. It's a typical thing in many NLP processes as well. You can work at the level of process or structure, which is the gold of NLP when skillfully applied. You're helping someone change the structure of their experience. Now, you can also work at the psychological illusion level, which is about helping them not necessarily change the content of their thinking or their behavior or even the structure. It's about helping them realize that their entire experience is made of thought, is thought generated, and is illusory. That's a quite different game. It's a quite different way of working. In my opinion and in my experience, working at that level gives you more bang for the buck. The changes have a tendency to be more transformative. The changes have a tendency to be deeper. And it's not for everyone. Not everyone will be able to hear much or be able to see much. And having said that, the more deeply you see this yourself, the more people you will reach with it. And what I see on the forum with some people is that they're turning formats such as the serial killer format and name it, find it, into tools to place into a more cognitive behavioral framework. Which, if you're doing that, you're not really practicing the psychological illusion model anymore. And you can do whatever you want. It's a free world in that sense. But be clear about which frameworks you're operating from and what you're selling. These formats are tools. They're pointers. They're ways of engaging the client to help them discover the illusory nature of their own thought-generated experience. It's very different to apply these formats with the intent of helping someone make discoveries like that versus using it as a tool in a more CBT type framework. That's a very, very different game. Also, if you start doing stuff like regressions and parts work and inner child therapy and stuff like that, I have mostly stopped doing stuff like that. To me, the disadvantages in terms of imposing bullshit far outweighs the benefits from the most part. But I'm not saying not do it. You all have to make your own independent assessments of how you like to work and when you're effective and what seems to resonate for you and your clients, but be very careful about blending that type of stuff into a session where you're trying to help the person see the illusory nature of their experience. Because you'll be the techniques reinforce frameworks and ways of thinking that are contrary to what you're attempting to do with the psychological illusion model. So that is a biggie as well. Remember this too. An illusion does not mean non-existent. There's a difference between a myth and an illusion. So when I say that something is a psychological or psychophysiological illusion, I'm not saying that something doesn't exist. I'm saying that it's not what it appears to be. So if I, for example, asked you, have you ever seen what should I make up? A flying zebra. You know, a flying zebra is not an illusion. It's non-existent. It doesn't exist. So there's a difference between an illusion and something that doesn't really exist. Just have to do something here. Okay. So that's a key point. There is a difference between a illusion and something that doesn't exist. So when you do the so when you think you're experiencing an illusion, you're actually experiencing the reality of something. I'll give you an example of this. So let's say that you watch a movie. So it might look like you're experiencing a car chase, you know, but what you're actually experiencing is the screen. The only thing that's really there is the screen. So the movie is the illusion. The screen is the reality of it. So when you're doing the name it, find it exercise, the reality of it is that the only thing that the person ever really experiences is a combination of images, words and sentences, sounds, body sensations and emotions, smells and tastes. I'm going to be agnostic about other proposed senses that are being researched and people have opinions about. So let's just make it simple. What people experience is images, words, sentences, body sensations, emotions, smells, and tastes, right? And all of these appearances are inseparable to the consciousness in which it is experienced. I'll say that again. The images, the words, the body sensations experienced are inseparable from the consciousness in which it is experienced. That's the reality of it. The illusion is that the person is experiencing some separate object, some separate thing. I have this anxiety that's doing something to me. I have this depression. I have this compulsion. I have this low self-esteem. This object, this thing, the uncertain future is tormenting me. The traumas from the past are haunting me. These are illusions. These are illusions. This is the result of images and words and sensations gluing together and the person not seeing it as that. So now it looks as if I'm experiencing a past or a situation or a future or a low self-esteem or a separate other that is making me feel a particular way, or I'm experiencing a compulsion. or an allergy. I'm not saying that the person's experience is non-existent. I'm saying that it's illusory. It's not what it looks to be. So when a person thinks that they're experiencing this anxiety or this depression or this low self-esteem, all they're really experiencing are images and sentences and body sensations which are inseparable to the consciousness in which it is experienced. That is the reality of it. You can help people discover that by doing a process such as the name it, find it process. So it's again, it's the fact that particular appearances glue themselves together, and it's not seen as thought, that makes it seem as if there's this thing that we're experiencing that's somehow separate from the thinking process. So there are two kind of extremist views that you can have. In Buddhism, they talk about this as the middle way. A lot of people see just a world of separate objects. I'm a separate object that's separate from you and separate from that, and it's all these separate objects that kind of relate to each other. That's one extremist view. The other extremist view is the idea that nothing exists. Nothing exists. It's all meaningless. It's all. These are all extremists' views. What I'm kind of proposing here is that yes, the world with its objects and people and situations still appear in consciousness, as real in a sense. Not saying it's not real. It is. It's not a myth as in non-existent. But what I'm also saying is that at the level of experience, there is no wife or child or job or future or past separate from the thinking process. And there's no thinking process separate from the consciousness in which it is experienced. So I think that's good for part one. I'll make a part two tomorrow, more about allergies and thoughts and a few other things. So I hope this was useful. Thanks.